I'm going to screen share. This is a presentation. I put here free for all. I guess I would put, I'll put here Brent VE9EX, something on the SDRPlay. I have a personal homepage here, and at this homepage, SatNOGS is just receive only. And part of this is to have ground stations to receive the signals from Violet. In this particular ground station, I set this up. Those are my notes. I set this up about a year and a half ago. This is the turnstile antenna homebrew made by Bernd Kurtz, VE9BJK, silent key. And I've made this available for the world to schedule observations. There are 2,000 observations that have been scheduled. If you look at the SatNOGS ground station network, these are all the ground stations in the world. And if you zoom in on where we are in New Brunswick, there are 2 here now. One of them was an SDRPlay that I'd set up during the Christmas break. So there's 3 in New Brunswick right now. The UNB ground station, I'm trying to set that one up to receive the signals from Violet. And there are 2 at my home. So this one, VE9EX1's been running for a few years, and VE9EX2 I was trying to set up. If I look at, so this was VE9EX2 is the second ground station. It's here on SatNOGS. It's just temporary. I don't have an antenna shown yet. I'm actually just using a Diamond X50A in my attic. And the signals are pretty good. If I look at my, this is the UNB ground station. The antennas are pretty good. The are 2 M² antennas, one for VHF, one for UHF. That was inspired by the antennas you have, Brent Taylor, for satellite communication, and they work quite well. This is still not online for other people to schedule observations because we're going through changes at UNB to try and set up some of the networking. I don't want to put it online until I can leave it online and it's permanent. So what I was doing over the Christmas, New Year's break was to try and get this SatNOGS ground station 2 running, and it took quite some time. So SatNOGS, satellite network open ground stations, they use the RTL SDR, which is an 8-bit analog to digital converter. They're quite common. If you look at all these ground stations all over the world, there are, and you zoom into one. Anybody want to pick a country and zoom in on a green dot? Pick a country. Anyone? I'm going to zoom in on Utah here. There's a ground station network in Utah. I have scheduled an observation on this. If you look at they've got an azimuth elevation rotator. These are all their observations. And if I zoom in and I pick one of their good green observations, like this one, it was a satellite pass, you can see they picked up a strong signal here. If you look in the metadata, you can see on here, the driver is an RTL SDR. So most of the SatNOGS network uses the RTL SDRs. They're very easy to configure. Well, I got an SDRPlay, which is an 8-bit analog to, the SDRPlay has 14 bits in their analog to digital converter, and I had quite a bit of difficulty getting this to run. So I eventually got it to run. The problem, I guess with the RTL SDR, it's an open hardware, and so a lot of the receivers are, the hardware is available and open. The SDRPlay, I suppose if I even Google SDRPlay, you would see the SDRPlay here from this company. And I, in fact, got the RSP1A. They have software downloads, other products. RSP1A, I actually got it from Radio World in Toronto. This is it. Worked quite well. I was able to use it in Windows and use it in, and it was great for listening to the Spectrum. And you can download the software to use in Windows. I documented what I needed to get the SDRPlay running on my ground station. And so there was another radio amateur, I think I gave credit possibly to this radio amateur, it was VK4, VK5QI, who had a forum posted in GitHub to try and get the SDRPlay running. I had some issues. I eventually found I had to use these proprietary Linux and drivers and application programming interface, and I followed this procedure. I used this build from VK5SI. VK5QI is a Mark Jessop, ham in Australia. So I followed his procedure, I modified it a little bit, and then was able to probe the SDR using the SOAPy SDR utility, which is just a generic interface that SatNOGS uses to talk to any SDR. This is what came out of that programming. I was able to test it, and you can see here it was checking the rate that it was streaming data from it. This showed the abstraction library, and I scheduled some observations. This is the metadata from the observation, and you can see now the SDRPlay. I had to put the serial number of the SDRPlay, my own latitude, longitude, and that's what I found. And in fact, I'm almost done. The interesting thing is I scheduled 2 observations. There's an LU sat, LU for Argentina. They have a satellite, and there's a mode that is CW. And so on my old, pardon me, I'll just clear these tabs. On my old original SatNOGS ground station, if I schedule an observation of LU sat, and you can just barely see the dotted line down the middle here. If I look at, and that this is with Bernd Kurtz's antenna, and it's a better antenna, but I found with the SDRPlay, if I look at this observation on the SDRPlay, it seemed like it was a little sharper, even though it wasn't. The antenna is really just a Diamond X50A. And so I might attribute this, and I haven't figured it out yet, but I might attribute this sharper signal on the SDRPlay to having 14 bits in the analog to digital converter, whereas the RTL SDR only had 8 bits, and so the signal doesn't look as good. Are there any questions?
So for this network, you schedule observations, and what information do you get from the observation, or is it just that it's passing overhead and you're able to hear it?
It depends on the signal to noise ratio. So if I show, pardon me, Malcolm, one moment. For these particular observations, I don't have an azimuth elevation rotator. I don't have a very good antenna. And so this is a CW signal, and this is just the waterfall, and it's time down. And in fact, it Doppler shifts the signal so that the signal of interest is in the middle. And I do plan to try and put antennas with higher gain, possibly on an azimuth elevation rotator, so that you could get the data from the signal. So in fact, it says here, this is the data from the CW or the Morse code. I doubt this is the data. However, if I go back to my original SatNOGS ground station, when I was first setting this up, I I went through lots of iterations and learning. All of this is on my website, so it's publicly available. I went through lots of iterations and lots of learning before I tried to figure out what was going on. So I put this online. For example, in this, you can sometimes see data on it. If I look, for example, pardon me, to answer your question, Malcolm, maybe make this a little bigger. It'd be easier to see. I scheduled some observations of others. So, for example, Fox 1B is an amateur radio satellite, and I was at Point Prim Lighthouse in PEI. My call sign at the time in commemoration of the coronation of King Charles was X-ray Kilo 2 / Victor X-ray 9 Echo X-ray, and that took quite a bit for some of the hams to pick that up on satellite. But this is the waterfall that was recorded at this station in Quebec. There is audio associated with it, and you can play the audio. VE9EX-2 eSIM. You can play the audio, and so this is actually recorded by SatNOGS. Wow, that's loud. If I go up here, I guess, Malcolm, to answer your question, SatNOGS, if it knows the type of signal, like if it's an analog FM signal, it will try and make that available to you. And then the reason for me doing this on the satellite receivers is I want to decode the AX25 packets sent from CubeSat Violet. And so although I'm not sure, somewhere in this satellite, I don't have an example of a decoded AX25 packet coming from space, but SatNOGS could do it. Thanks for asking that question. Are there other questions? All right. Well, I was totally unprepared to do this, but I thought we should have something at a meeting. I might pick the brains of some of the people in this group who are more experienced dealing with AX25 and nodes and sending messages by packet, like Gary, Brent, and so on. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you. I will stop recording.